Now in our 18th season, it's been such a fun romp and so educational. I'm really pleased today to have as a guest a newer friend and neighbor, Dr. Cary Fowler. He's truly a trailblazing agriculturalist and co-recipient of the 2024 World Food Prize. Born in Memphis, Tennessee, Dr. Fowler has dedicated his life to safeguarding global food security and crop diversity. He's a widely recognized as the father, quote unquote, of the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, which might sound intriguing or James Bondish, and we're going to talk about that today for those of you who don't know about it. And it now protects over 1 million unique crop varieties. Dr. Fowler's career has spanned activism during the civil rights era, leadership in international agricultural policy, and pivotal roles in protecting genetic resources worldwide. His journey has been nothing short of astonishing, marked by resilience, innovation, and relentless commitment to the future of our food supply, and doing it with a little sense of humanity and fun. Dr. Fowler, Cary, welcome to the Caring Economy.
Oh, thanks, Toby. It's good to be with you. Good to see you.
I will say at the start, like, thank you for your service because as people will learn after listening to this interview, like your contributions have been significant and most people don't know how touched they've been by it. But let me have the opening sort of statement. I'd love you to do, as we do with all of our guests, give us a 3, 4 minute digest of your life, sort of where you were raised, how you found your way, pivots, or any mentors along the way, whatever it is that helped you find your way to where you are today.
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, I was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. I spent some summers, some parts of each summer on my grandmother's family farm. It was a pretty normal childhood, I think. My father was a lawyer and then a judge. My mother was a registered dietitian. I went to church every Sunday. I played baseball and basketball. Pretty normal. I can very much relate to Jim and Scout's upbringing in To Kill a Mockingbird. My father even looked a little bit like Gregory Peck and had a case like him. So it was that type of childhood, I think. But of course, something was going on in the South during the 50s and 60s, and it was a real crucible if you were growing up and paying attention to that. I was watching the news every night, seeing civil rights demonstrators be tear gassed and beaten. I would cry at a very early age. I really was moved by that emotionally. I started to write letters to the editor when I was probably 12 years old, and that generated a few death threats, which came by mail in those days. I never showed those to my parents, but it was that type of upbringing. And of course, I was involved in the civil rights movement other than just writing letters to the editor. There was a sanitation workers strike going on in Memphis that brought Martin Luther King to town. I attended his last speech in Memphis the day before he was assassinated on April 4th in 68. There were also other things going on. There was a war in Vietnam going on. And when I registered for the draft and when I was 18 years old in 1967, I registered as a conscientious objector.
Mm.
So those were kind of some of the initial growing up pains and experiences, I guess you would say. And from there, I'll just mention one other thing. I did go to work for something called Southern Exposure, which was a journal that a group of Southerners, black and white, put out to celebrate the good things about the American South and to be critical of some of the bad things. And we did publish a journal on agriculture in the South, and that really woke me up to the fact that pieces of my background and that I were very much emotionally tied to could be brought together. In other words, agriculture and a reverence for farmers and thinking of them as civil servants in a way could be brought together with issues of justice and
Mm.
progress.
Mm. So I have to start right with Dr. King. I mean, what an epic moment in history. What was that like to be in his presence and hear his words at that moment in time?
Well, I didn't know that that was going to be his last speech or an historic speech in any way. It became quite historic. It's famous for what he said towards the end of the speech. I've been to the mountaintop and I may not get there with you, but you as a people will get to the promised land.
Wow.
It was raining. It was a big thunderstorm in Memphis that night. I read reports afterwards that he was tired and didn't want to go to the church, but there were a lot of people in the church and they finally persuaded him to go. He was quite late. And I must say, until he walked in, I never understood what charisma was all about. When he walked in, I think, like everyone else in the room, I felt kind of tingling in my body. He was quite a personality.
Electrifying. And can you say about the audience and your passion then, particularly around civil rights? Perhaps not fair, but could you compare and contrast it with those who are civic minded or activists or engaged today? Is it same as it ever was? Do you see some common traits or inspirations or some lacking?
Well, I'm not sure, Toby. I think that in those days, first of all, we didn't know if we were going to win those battles or lose them. During that period of my life, I thought my life might be short because people like me were being killed in some places. And I thought, well, so be it. So you never had a sense that success was guaranteed. And I think what that did was to give you a feeling that you had to live your life in good faith and that was essentially the reward, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, I'm astonished thinking about it today with social media where there's anonymity that you received, if I understand correctly, as a 12-year-old, at least one death threat letter posted to your address.
I think I still have it actually.
I mean, wow. It's it's shocking. So I could understand why you might fear for having a short life or be thinking you might. So then that bridge between agriculture and civil rights is kind of interesting. Can you say a little bit more about how that sort of how do you put that into practice? You wrote the newsletter or the journal.
Yeah, yeah. Well, at that time, I was very much aware that the family farm was threatened in the United States. I was also one side of my family, my father's side, were all in public service. On my mother's side, they were in agriculture, and on my mother's side, they viewed farmers as civil servants in a way, as providing a service to
Mhm.
society. So I had great appreciation and reverence for farmers, and I thought the family farm was an institution that really ought to go forward. Too old to die young, in a way. When I got together with people to work on this journal, Southern Exposure, that's where those kinds of issues all met. And I can remember a few staff meetings, Toby, when I would say, well, we need to have an article about family farmers. And at a certain point, they got really tired of me saying that. And they kind of all turned to me in unison and said, you write it. That was the launch of my career,
Realistic career.
let's say. So I wrote an article about how family farms were threatened. And from that, it took me to larger issues, which were, what's happening with the global food system.
Uh-huh. And climate, or that came later.
Eventually climate.
Yeah. So your academic studies, your tertiary studies, was it all agriculture? Because you went all the way up through a PhD. Was that overlapping with the newsletter or the journal?
No, not at all. I started university in Memphis at Rhodes College, but I had wanderlust about halfway through and I changed schools to a university in British Columbia, Canada. After that, I did some service as a conscientious objector working in a hospital. And then I still had wanderlust and I was looking at the world as a big place. And I applied to a bunch of graduate schools. I told myself I would go to the best one I got into. By the way, I think I applied to six. The first three that were all backup schools rejected me. So, of course, I thought my academic career was over. And then the three best all accepted me.
Wow.
What can you say? I mean, it's kind of like a
Keep
lottery.
that. I'm with you. I did
Um,
get my Fulbright my first time, and you know, always get, but if you really want it, you go for it. So good
yeah.
on you.
So the one that I thought was the best was in Sweden, Uppsala University. And off I went to Uppsala, having saved up money from having worked in the hospital. I thought I had enough money for the first year, but Sweden turned out to be twice as expensive as I thought it was going to be. So I had enough money for the first 6 months, but it was a start.
And then that precedes the next question. You've anticipated it, which is, I think, leads to the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. You're studying in Scandinavia. Can you, I sort of jumping ahead, but tell us about the Seed Vault, some call it the Doomsday Vault, I think, and that evolved from your time of studying there, or? How did that?
No, no, not at all. Not at all. I worked with the National Sharecroppers Fund and the Rural Advancement Fund. I was very involved in some treaty negotiations at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN in Rome, Italy. And from there, I had a little bit of an academic career. I was on the faculty of a university in Norway, and I spent a year being a visiting professor at the University of California at Davis. But around this time, the UN called me up and said, well, we're going to offer you, we want you to take a job, and it's to devise a global system for conserving crop diversity.
Hmm.
Okay.
Cool. Like, wow, who gets that call? Save the world.
Yeah, I went off and did that. And so I ended up really spending most of my adulthood, most of my professional life working on conserving the diversity of our agricultural crops. That's important because that's a diversity that plant breeders use for fashioning new varieties of crops, climate adapted, higher yielding, disease resistant, whatever. And the problem there, of course, is that a lot of that diversity is being lost. And as you lose those older varieties, you lose whatever unique traits they might have, such as disease resistance or heat
Hmm.
tolerance.
Hmm.
We in agriculture, we're really living in an age of extinction, kind of like the age of the dinosaurs or something.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of stuff being lost. And that's just not good enough in an era of rapid change, such as we're experiencing now. So we thought, what can we do about that? Along the way, countries had been establishing seed banks. They were collecting that diversity from farmers' fields and they were putting it in seed banks, which is basically a fancy word for a refrigerator or a freezer. That's how you conserve seed long term. You freeze them.
Hmm.
But those seed banks were themselves vulnerable. Fires, floods, hurricanes, whatever, mismanagement, equipment failures. So, what can we do to resolve that problem? And that brought us up near the North Pole with Svalbard and the Seed Vault.
Ladies and gentlemen, again today on the Caring Economy, I'm really happy to have our neighbor and friend and guest, the world-renowned, celebrated agriculturalist, Dr. Cary Fowler, also leader in food security. Cary, with the Seed Vault, I really do never, I'd love to see it. I've read about it. Is it James Bond like? It feels like, a dystopian, utopian kind of clash of universes. What's it like? Is it like how many feet underground? Is it a concrete bunker? What would one see there?
Well, it is James Bond like. I thought about that often and I thought, sooner or later they're going to make a movie up here and here's my chance to meet a Bond girl and whoever James Bond is at the moment. Um,
Your wife is pretty close.
So yeah, it's located near the North Pole. It's the farthest north you can fly on a regularly scheduled airplane. So if you've got a globe handy, just go to the North Pole and scroll downwards towards mainland Norway. It's an archipelago called Svalbard. The reason we put it there was so that it would be remote. We wanted it pretty far away from the normal dangers in the world, but also still accessible because you've got to get seeds in and out. We built the facility. I say Norway built it. It funded it completely. It was meant to be a backup copy for all the other collections in the world, and that's the great thing about seeds. You can make copies. So a regular seed bank in the world would send us a duplicate copy of their collections, and we would store it very much like a safety deposit box at the bank. Norway owns the mountain, but you own your seeds inside your box.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, so pretty simple design. It's built about 130 meters into a solid stone mountain. We found the coldest place in the mountain, tunneled back there, built three vault rooms. It's naturally frozen about 4 to 5 degrees minus Celsius. But we further cool it down to minus 18, which is the temperature that most good seed banks operate at. And that's so we're on the same schedule with
Mhm.
them. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. We tried the real key to making it sustainable and effective was to make it cheap and to make it foolproof.
Mhm.
So there's no staff up there running it. You don't need a staff to watch frozen seeds. And the electricity cost for freezing the seeds is minimal. You're taking it from about -5 to -18, which, by the way, is the temperature more or less in your freezer in your kitchen.
Okay.
And we went out to the different seed banks around the world, different countries,
Huh.
and persuaded them that they ought to send a copy up there. And so now we have like 1,350,000 different samples of agricultural crops.
Is there a video monitor if someone wanted to go to a website and see, even though there's nothing going on, the seed?
I don't think it's online, but it is monitored in all sorts of ways for security purposes. It's a very safe facility, and we've never even there's kind of a concrete wedge that juts out of the mountain. That's the entrance to the seed vault. Once you go
Oh,
through that
cool.
door, you go through a long tunnel. But we've never even had any graffiti on the outside, so it's a pretty
Okay.
safe
I
facility.
have
Open.
two other parallel visions. I'm seeing both a pyramid where, like what's buried inside. And then when you're talking about a bank vault, I'm actually thinking about the Federal Reserve Bank and the gold bullion that they move around down there. And in a
Yeah.
certain sense, these seeds are sort of like play a similar role of potential diversity, I think, or biodiversity for our world. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you think about it, what we have in the seed vault really is the biological foundation of agriculture. So it's, in a sense, the history, everything our crops have seen and adapted to is represented in those seeds down there. But by the same token, it's also the future of agriculture. It's everything agriculture can be in the future.
Huh.
So if you're thinking about natural resources and you sort of invoke the gold mine or the Fort Knox kind of comparison, well, this is probably the most valuable natural resource on Earth.
Mm.
So why wouldn't we go to some lengths to conserve it?
So for example, if I understand you correctly, if we know that we're moving toward a drought, you'll want seeds that could actually produce in a drier setting. And if you don't have those seeds that are actually adaptable, then you don't have any food.
Well, that's right. Or you may have a trait for drought tolerance in one seed and a trait for a particular disease tolerance in another. And those two are going to be what a plant breeder breeds with, crosses to produce something that's drought tolerant and disease or pest resistant.
So this is like the perfect complement, and I think understand how you then get into global food security, right? Biodiversity and these initiatives are interesting for sure, but at the end of the day, it's about keeping the planet sustained and feeding people, right?
That's right.
So that is where you spent a lot of the past several decades in your career, right? You've just retired from the State Department, leading global food security. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And without necessarily spooking people, but if we need to spook people, like what do people need to know about food security? It's not just over there, right?
Well, we're in a frightening period of time now. I think agriculture faces an historic combination of challenges, the likes of which it's never faced before. So there's climate change,
Mm.
which is taking us to climates that we haven't seen in a couple 100,000 years. Agriculture, by the way, is only 10 to 15,000 years old. So none of our agricultural crops are adapted to climates that haven't been around for much longer than agriculture. But also, there's soil loss and loss of fertility of soils around the world. There's the fact that most of the major global aquifers in the world are being depleted faster than they're being replenished.
Mm.
There are conflict situations that cause food insecurity, and food insecurity causes conflict. And we're stepping back, particularly in the United States, from our historic commitment to agricultural research and development, which has fueled food production in my lifetime and prevented there from being more food shortages than there have been. So we've got a lot of challenges.
You've alluded to this in the past, I think, since we first spoke, and now I think it's public. Can you say a little bit about the initiative you're working on to sort of address the future of food security from a U.S. perspective?
Sure. Well, together with some friends and colleagues, we launched just a couple of weeks ago an organization called the Food Security Leadership Council. This council exists to bring together some of the best minds and people with the most experience in agricultural development globally. The idea is to develop a blueprint for what a future U.S. government could do in the space of global food security. We've historically in the United States really taken the lead in global food security matters. I think it's fair to say we're stepping back from that at the moment.
Mm,
But this is our comparative advantage in the world. And what happens in Africa, for example, doesn't stay in Africa. The correlation between food insecurity and conflict is pretty direct. It's pretty direct with terrorism and such. Arab Spring, for example, started in an unusually hot and dry summer, and there were food price spikes as a result of that. So I think it's both a reflection of American values and American interest that we try to help solve some of these global food security problems. And what we want to do with the Food Security Leadership Council is to figure out, well, what are the absolute most critical, essential things that this government ought to be doing to promote global food security?
mm.
There are a million good and nice and charitable things to do, but what are the most essential things to do that where we can help other people become more food and nutrition secure, and therefore to promote national security, their national security, our national security? That's what we hope to develop, is that type of blueprint and plan going forward.
And so I think you have some Nobel laureates and people like yourself working on this. These are, as you say, quite qualified. Do you think that, well, two things I like about it. One is I think we have to envision a future that is not fully identified by one administration, right? This is a democracy and administrations change. I like that you're envisioning a life in the future, but also it's, I think, an invitation or call to action because if you let people know your mission, what you're up to, it's an invitation to learn more. I suspect you have to do a lot of myth busting for people around food. Like they think, I go to the grocery store, it's there. The prices go up, they go down. But I think there's a big detachment between most Americans now of where food comes from, whether it's beef or seeing a tomato plant grow or whatever. So I like that aspect as well. You're helping people think about the big issue. Do you have any reflections on that? How do you get the average American consumer, say an 18-year-old kid, to know, care, think about something like food security, which sounds abstract at first blush?
Well, I think it's always difficult to connect some of these dots. People don't live their life connecting dots, and they also don't live their life thinking very long term. I've learned that all along the way, from my days working on civil rights to my days working on the Seed Vault. I've always been pretty comfortable thinking very, very long term. But the long term has a way of catching up with you. I think there's some journalists that said that short term solutions are the cause of our long term problems.
Here,
Uh,
here.
so here we are.
Quick fixes
Uh,
aren't them?
Here we are.
Yeah,
And that means that, like I said a few minutes ago, we need to double down and prioritize some of our agricultural research, but we also need to emotionally, psychologically be in this for the long term. And we shouldn't be thinking, for example, that if there's climate change, and there is, by the way, Toby, there have been more than 550 consecutive months in which the global temperature for that month exceeded the 20th century average for that
yeah.
month.
It's
So a lot of
that
people will say,
direction.
wow, well, our crops will just adapt to that. They're going to have to adapt. But our crops don't listen to what our needs are. They're domesticated. They do what we help them and fashion them to do. And that's not a short-term matter. And likewise, the solution of, well, let's just move a crop that's growing or a variety that's growing in Tennessee, let's just move that up to Ohio and New York
Right,
for a little bit cooler weather. No, that's not the way it works. The day length period is different, the rainfall, the pest and diseases are different. Everything's different. So
yeah,
we are in the middle of a big agricultural experiment right now.
yeah.
And we have to realize that we need all hands on deck to get out of that. And that's a long-term matter. And we're going to see food crises pop up around the world. And when they do, they're going to affect us in our life and the price at the grocery store.
Yeah. Well, so I came up in the private sector and believe that it has an important role to play, the deepest bench strength, pockets, and so forth. Can you say anything about the private sector? I'm thinking like Archer's Daniel Midland and the big seed and agricultural companies. Are they doing their part? Are they part of the solution or problem? Or I don't know. I just think that they've got the potential to really help, and it's in their best interest and their shareholders' best interest.
Yeah. Well, I think there are many different agricultural systems around the world. So for us to think that the American systems of agriculture can be transported lock, stock, and barrel to other countries is pretty naive.
Mhm.
But definitely the private sector has a role to play, large scale private sector and small scale, depending on the situation. When I was at the State Department, we had excellent cooperation with the private sector. I think they see the problems that I've been talking with you
Uh-huh.
about pretty clearly, actually, and are looking for ways to contribute in a positive fashion.
Good. Well, maybe this launch of your leadership council will be an inspiration for some of them to step up or fund. So I'm mindful of your time, Carrie. Two last questions. The one is AI. I'm quite passionate about AI and teaching intro courses now, and I've heard intermittently about AI being used in agriculture, that you can almost to the millimeter point water or resources using technology. Do you have any thoughts or reflections at this point in time about AI and how it can or will affect food security or crops production and the like?
I was asked this exact question by a senator from Indiana in a Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing. I told him,
Honored.
hey, I'm 75. What do I know about this type of technology? It's moving so fast, it's hard to keep up with. But for sure, I mean, it is an amazing tool. And these types of developments can help us in modeling some of the crop breeding work that's done. So you can kind of anticipate that if you make a cross between this plant and that plant, can kind of anticipate or model what the results will be, and in that way end up doing the real scientific crossing work only when the model indicates that you've got a pretty good chance of success.
Yeah. Well, I'm
So
happy to comp you from my 1 hour class because you're the perfect candidate, someone who's so accomplished professionally and the ability to, in my experience, to take accomplished, responsible people to leverage AI, the ability to collaborate more, come up with really interesting solutions and scale is phenomenal. But I'll come back to you offline on that. My last question is about your pearls of wisdom that you've gleaned throughout your career. What would you say to either young people or even maybe disenchanted older folks about life and leading a life with purpose and joy?
well, along the way, Toby, I never thought that what I was doing was a career. I was really lucky to have employers that would give me a paycheck to do what I felt was important and fulfilling. So I don't think I'm a model for any young person. I did grow up being pretty stubborn. A kid that writes letters to the editor
At
when they're
12.
12 years old is a
I get
stubborn.
the death threat.
Yeah, that's stubbornness.
Precocious to say the least.
So, persistent, yes. Stubborn, yes. I think living a life in good faith is its own reward. If you can do something that is fulfilling for you and serves a social purpose, which I think the longer you live, I think giving back and doing something with a social purpose, you will find to be more and more fulfilling.
Mhm.
Uh,
Absolutely.
I think that's important to do.
Yeah.
And somehow finding a way to follow the beat of your own drummer is good.
Yeah. Well, you've set a great example, and I really appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, today, again, I'm so grateful and happy to have had our neighbor and friend and guest, Dr. Cary Fowler, a leading agriculturalist and civil servant. And Cary, I want to regroup with you after maybe 6 months with the Food Security Leadership Council and see how things are going. And of course, if we can be of help, let us know. Is there a way for people to be in touch or find out more about it?
Sure, they can go to our website. It's just up. It's foodsecurityleadership.org.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Fowler. Have a
Sure.
great
Thank you,
summer.
Connie. So, thank you.